Have you ever noticed how heavy a thought can be? It weighs nothing on a scale, yet it can feel like you are carrying a mountain on your shoulders. It keeps you awake. It keeps you tight. It keeps you from the peace you deserve. I'm glad you're here. If you are listening to this, it's likely that your day has been long, or your mind is busy. Perhaps you are replaying conversations, worrying about tomorrow, or simply feeling a tension you can't quite name. That is okay. You don't need to force it to stop. And if you feel like it, you can gently let me know in the comments where you're listening from tonight. Sometimes, it's comforting to realize how many of us are quietly sharing this same moment from different corners of the world. You see, the mind is like a guardian dog. It barks at shadows because it wants to protect you. We don't need to yell at the dog to be quiet. We just need to gently let it know that we are safe, so it can lay its head down and rest. For the next hour, I am going to share a collection of stories with you. These aren't just fairy tales. They are mirrors. Some are from the Zen tradition, some from Stoic philosophy, and some are simple metaphors for the human experience. Each story revolves around two things: the art of letting go and the discovery of your inner strength. You don't need to memorize these stories. You don't even need to listen to every word. If you drift off to sleep in the middle of a sentence, that is perfect. That is the goal. Think of my voice as a gentle breeze. You can enjoy it while it's there, but you don't need to hold on to it. Get comfortable now. Adjust your pillows. Let your shoulders drop away from your ears. Unclench your jaw. Let's begin with our first journey, a journey about the weight we choose to carry. The first thing Chloe noticed wasn't the rainbow. It was the smell. That clean, washed smell that came after heavy rain. Wet pavement leaves a little bit of metal in the air. The kind of smell that made the city feel newly rinsed, like someone had turned the volume down on everything. Chloe stood under the bus stop shelter with her tote bag hooked around her wrist, watching water drip from the edge of the roof in steady little taps. The street in front of her shined under the streetlights, dark and reflective, like it had been polished. She was 22, working retail in a mall that always felt too bright and too loud. By the time her shift ended, her mind usually felt like a room full of people talking at once. Most nights, she just wanted to get home, take off her shoes, and stop thinking. Tonight, the rain had made that difficult. Not because it was dangerous, it was just a lot. The kind of rain that made you feel trapped in your own plans. The kind that turned simple commutes into long waits and damp sleeves and the quiet irritation of things not going smoothly. Chloe shifted her weight, watching the bus route app spin and refresh. Delayed. She sighed and tucked her phone back into her pocket. She'd been trying lately to get her life to feel more certain, more predictable. She was saving money, applying for different jobs, looking at apartments online she couldn't afford yet, but liked to imagine anyway. She kept telling herself that once she got to the next thing, she'd feel calmer. But the next thing kept moving. And when the rain came down hard earlier, it felt like the universe was just messing with her timing for fun. Chloe leaned her head lightly against the cool glass panel of the shelter. Her hair was slightly damp at the ends. Her sweatshirt smelled faintly like rainwater. She wasn't miserable exactly, just worn down by the feeling that something always had to be managed. A car passed, tires hissing through shallow puddles. Water sprayed out in a thin fan and then settled again. The street accepted it without complaint. Chloe watched that and felt a weird thought slide in. Maybe I'm the only one arguing with what's happening. The rain wasn't personal. It didn't know her. It didn't care about her plans. It was just rain doing rain things, falling where it fell. That thought didn't solve anything, but it softened her irritation just enough. She looked up at the sky. Clouds still covered most of it, but the downpour had slowed into a lighter drizzle. The air felt calmer. The kind of calm that comes not when things are perfect, but when they've already done the worst of what they're going to do. A few people stood nearby under the shelter, quiet strangers with damp bags and tired faces. Nobody was talking much. Everyone had that shared temporary patience that happens when the weather forces you to slow down. Chloe pulled her tote bag closer to her body, feeling the solid weight of it. She wasn't alone, she realized. Not in her discomfort, not in her waiting. Everyone was waiting for something. A bus, a change, a break, a sign. The sky shifted again. A sliver of lighter color appeared at the edge of the clouds. Not bright, not hopeful in a cheesy way. Just different. Chloe took out her phone to check the bus again, then stopped. Not because she didn't care. She did. But she noticed how checking over and over didn't speed anything up. It only made her feel like she was chasing the same moment. She put the phone away and let her shoulders drop. The rain continued quieter now. Drip, drip, drip. Chloe watched the water gather at the curb and flow toward the drain, carrying little pieces of leaf and grit with it. The city looked a little cleaner, not spotless, just washed enough. She thought about fear, not big fear, but that background fear that lived in her chest lately. Fear that she'd make the wrong choice. Fear that she'd be stuck. Fear that she'd miss her chance at something better. Fear loved to show up when the future felt foggy. But the rain had cleared the air in a way she could feel on her skin. Cool, fresh, honest. She lifted her gaze again, and that's when she saw it. Not fully formed yet. Just a faint arc in the distance, barely visible against the thinning clouds. Easy to miss if you weren't looking. A gentle band of color that didn't demand attention. Chloe stared at it, surprised by how much it affected her. It wasn't that she thought it meant something magical. It just reminded her that the sky could change without asking. The rain had looked endless earlier, and now it was already leaving. She stood there, a little straighter still, waiting for the bus, still damp at the edges, but lighter in a way that didn't require explanation. The arc in the sky grew slightly clearer as the drizzle thinned. Chloe didn't take a photo. She didn't want to trap it in her phone. She just watched. Sometimes the beauty doesn't show up instead of the scary part. Sometimes it shows up right after, quietly, like a soft return. The bus arrived without any drama. No screeching brakes, no rush of people. It pulled up slowly, water dripping from its sides, headlights dull in the damp air. Chloe stepped on with the others, tapped her card, and found a seat near the window. The warmth inside fogged the glass, almost immediately softening the outside world into colors and movement. She wiped a small circle in the fog with her sleeve and leaned her head against the window as the bus eased back into traffic. Outside, the rainbow was clearer now. Still gentle. Still not shouting for attention. It stretched across the sky like something the day had almost forgotten to leave behind. Chloe watched it move in and out of view as the bus turned corners and passed buildings. It didn't stay perfectly intact. One end faded, then returned. Colors shifted as the angle changed. It was never the same twice. That felt important somehow. Fear, she realized, often came from wanting things to stay fixed. Wanting certainty to hold its shape. Wanting guarantees that didn't really exist. When things shifted plans, moods, directions, fear rushed in to fill the gap. But the rainbow didn't resist changing. It didn't try to stay visible. It appeared softened and slowly thinned out perfectly, okay with not lasting. Chloe's shoulders relaxed as the bus moved steadily forward. The hum of the engine was low and even. People around her sat quietly, some scrolling on their phones, some staring out their own windows. Nobody needed anything from her. That was a relief she hadn't realized she was craving. She thought about how earlier, standing in the rain, everything had felt heavy and inconvenient. How easy it was to believe that discomfort meant something was wrong. But the rain hadn't been a mistake. It had just been weather passing through, doing what it always did. And now something softer followed. Not as a reward, not as compensation, just as the next phase. The bus stopped and started. Traffic lights glowed against the wet street. The rainbow grew fainter, blending back into the gray-blue of the sky until it was hard to tell where it ended and the clouds began. Chloe didn't feel disappointed when it disappeared. She felt settled. She noticed her breath again, slow and even, matching the rhythm of the bus. In that moment, she wasn't behind. She wasn't late. She wasn't failing at anything. She was simply moving, carried forward without needing to control the route. That thought loosened something inside her chest. The future didn't need to look bright all the time to be okay. It didn't need constant signs or reassurance. Sometimes it just needed patience enough to let the storm finish saying what it needed to say. Chloe rested her hands in her lap and watched the city slide past. Storefronts closed for the night. Streetlights flickered on. The ordinary evening unfolded without asking her to understand it. By the time the bus reached her stop, the sky had returned to its usual muted colors. No rainbow, no spectacle, just the quiet aftermath of rain. She stepped off the bus and walked the short distance to her apartment, shoes, damp air cool against her face. The sidewalk glistened, reflecting the lights in broken patterns that shifted with every step. Chloe unlocked her door and went inside, hanging her tote by the entryway. She didn't rush to change clothes. She didn't check her phone. She stood for a moment in the stillness of her apartment, listening to the faint drip of water from the eaves outside. The day had been hard. The rain had been annoying. The waiting had been uncomfortable. And still something gentle had followed. She understood now that fear often showed up when things felt overwhelming, but it didn't get the final word. Change carried its own rhythm. Storms moved through. Clearings appeared. Not always dramatically, not always on schedule. Sometimes the beauty was brief. Sometimes it was subtle. Sometimes it was only visible if you stopped fighting what came before it. Chloe turned off the lights and went to bed, the memory of the rainbow already fading into something less visual and more felt. A quiet trust. A sense that even after the scariest moments, the world had a way of softening again. The rain had passed. The colors had come and gone. And that was enough to let the night take over gently, without fear. The road was almost empty at that hour. Marcus liked driving late after most people had already decided where they were going to be. The freeway felt wider then, less impatient. The kind of space that didn't push back when you slowed down a little. He kept one hand on the steering wheel, the other resting loosely on his thigh. The radio was on, but low, just enough sound to keep him company without asking him to listen. Streetlights passed in steady intervals, each one briefly lighting the inside of the truck before giving way to the next. Marcus was 41, a delivery driver who'd learned to measure his days in routes and miles instead of milestones. Some weeks were good. Tips were better. Energy was higher. Other weeks felt heavier, like the road itself had more resistance. Tonight was one of the heavier ones. Nothing had gone wrong exactly. No breakdowns, no arguments, no bad news. Just a quiet sense of being low, like he'd slipped to the bottom of something he didn't remember climbing. He glanced at the fuel gauge, then back at the road. Plenty left. Enough to get home. Enough to keep going without worry. Fear for Marcus didn't come as panic. It came as doubt. The kind that asked whether this was it. Whether the upswings he remembered were already behind him. Whether the low feeling meant something permanent. The road curved gently, and Marcus followed it without thinking. The truck responded easily, tires humming against the asphalt. Movement without effort. He thought about the wheel, not the one in his hands, but the idea of it. How everything that turned had a top and a bottom. How you couldn't have one without the other. How motion itself depended on that rise and fall. When he was younger, being down felt like failure. It felt like proof that he'd taken a wrong turn somewhere. Now it felt different, less personal, more familiar. Marcus had been here before. He'd been up before too. Neither place had lasted. The freeway dipped slightly, then rose again. Not enough to notice if you weren't paying attention. But Marcus felt it anyway. The subtle shift in the truck's weight, the way gravity played its quiet games. The city stretched out ahead of him, lights scattered like something dropped and never picked up. No single destination pulled at him. Home was coming, but it wasn't urgent. The road was doing most of the work. He loosened his grip on the wheel without realizing he'd tightened it. Sometimes being at the bottom made everything feel heavier than it actually was. Thoughts sank. Energy pulled inward. Fear whispered that this was the truth of things, not just a phase. But Marcus had learned slowly that the bottom wasn't a punishment. It was part of the turning. He remembered his first long route years ago, how strange it felt to trust the road, to let the drive unfold mile by mile without trying to rush it. He'd wanted progress to be obvious, visible, measurable. The road had taught him otherwise. Progress often felt flat from the inside, like nothing was happening at all. The radio crackled softly, then settled. Marcus adjusted it, then let his hand fall back to his leg. The truck moved steadily, engine doing its quiet work. If life was a wheel, then tonight was just the low point passing under him, the part that touched the ground, the part that carried the weight so the rest of the turn could happen. He didn't need to escape it. He didn't need to fix it. He just needed to keep rolling. Marcus breathed out slowly, eyes steady on the road ahead. The next street light passed overhead, then another. Each one exactly like the last, and somehow reassuring because of it. The road didn't judge where he was on the turn. It just kept going. As the miles slipped by, Marcus felt the night widen around him. Traffic thinned even more until the freeway felt like a long, quiet ribbon laid out just for him. The radio faded into static, and he turned it off, preferring the low, steady sound of the engine. It reminded him that something was working without needing his attention. The road dipped again, then slowly rose. He didn't watch the incline, he felt it. The way the truck leaned forward just a touch, then leveled out. Motion doing what motion always did. Marcus noticed how being down had a texture to it. Not sharp, not dramatic, just heavy. Like gravity had quietly turned itself up. When he was younger, he used to fight that feeling. Drink more coffee, push harder, demand answers from himself. He'd thought momentum came from effort. Lately, he was learning something else. Sometimes momentum came from allowing the turn. He rested both hands lightly on the wheel, not gripping, just guiding. The dashboard lights glowed softly familiar and unremarkable. Fuel speed time, all within range. All fine. Fear tried once more to tell its story. What if this low doesn't lift? What if this is where things stay? Marcus didn't argue. He didn't reassure himself. He simply noticed the thought pass through like a mile marker flashing by and disappearing in the rearview mirror. The wheel didn't stop at the bottom. It never had. He thought about seasons he'd lived through, times when money was easier, times when it wasn't. Relationships that felt effortless, then slowly wore down. Confidence that rose faded, returned in a different shape. None of it had stayed fixed. None of it had defined him permanently. The wheel turned because that was its nature. The freeway straightened, and the truck settled into an even rhythm. Marcus felt his breathing match it without trying. In, out. Simple, unforced. There was relief in realizing that being low didn't mean being lost. It meant being supported by the ground for a while, bearing weight, gathering traction. From the bottom, the only direction available was forward. Streetlights continued their steady pattern. Light, dark, light, dark. The repetition was calming, predictable in a way that didn't demand anything. Marcus's shoulders dropped. His jaw loosened. The sense of urgency he'd been carrying all evening softened like something uncoiling on its own. He didn't need to climb right now. He didn't need to prove anything. The turn was already happening. A sign for his exit appeared in the distance. He didn't rush toward it. He let it come to him, guiding the wheel gently as the truck followed the curve off the freeway. The city streets were quieter than usual, washed clean by the late hour. As he drove the last few blocks home, Marcus felt something settle into place. Not optimism, not excitement, just trust. Trust in the rhythm he'd seen play out again and again. Trust that what felt low now would not stay there forever. He parked, turned off the engine, and sat for a moment in the sudden quiet. The world didn't collapse when the motion stopped. It simply rested. Marcus opened the door and stepped out into the cool air. The night felt steady, unconcerned, like it had room for every rise and fall without judgment. Being at the bottom wasn't the end of the story. It was the part that touched the earth, the part that made the turning possible. He locked the truck and walked toward his door, pace unhurried, body lighter than it had been earlier. Tomorrow would come with its own stretch of road, its own highs and lows. For now it was enough to know this: the wheel keeps turning, the low point passes, and even here, even now, the movement continues quietly, faithfully, carrying him forward into whatever came next. Some evenings don't feel dramatic. Nothing goes wrong in a loud way. It's just that everything feels a little unsteady. Like the ground isn't doing anything wrong, but you don't quite trust it either. It was one of those evenings. A long day had already ended, but the body hadn't caught up yet. The parking lot behind the building was almost empty, the kind of quiet that comes after people have gone home and the lights stay on anyway. The engine was off. The seat was still warm. Somewhere far away, another car started and then faded into the street. Sitting there, there was a familiar feeling in the chest. Not panic, not exactly worry. More like a constant readiness, as if something might happen and it would be important to be prepared. The mind kept drifting forward. Tomorrow's schedule. A conversation that hadn't happened yet. A small fear that didn't have a clear shape. Nothing urgent, but nothing settled either. After a few minutes, the door opened. Cool air came in. Shoes touched the asphalt. The body stretched without thinking about it, shoulders rolling once, twice, as if trying to shake something loose. The night smelled faintly like oil and warm concrete. And then, almost by accident, one foot lifted. It wasn't a decision made with meaning, just a shift of weight while standing beside the car. One foot stayed planted. The other hovered uncertain before settling against the ankle. At first it felt silly. A grown adult standing in a quiet parking lot, balanced on one leg like a kid pretending to be a flamingo. But the body didn't care about looking silly. It immediately got busy. Ankles adjusted, toes spread inside the shoe. A small muscle in the calf woke up and complained. There was a wobble. The lifted foot touched down again, then lifted once more. This time the body stayed up, not perfectly still. There was movement, a tiny sway side to side. The arms shifted slightly away from the body without permission, like they knew their job. The breath changed too. Short at first, then slower, deeper, as if it had been waiting for a reason. Standing there on one leg, something became clear in a quiet way. Balance wasn't about being rigid. The moment the body tried to freeze, everything shook more. It was the small, constant adjustments that kept things upright. A little give, a little response. The mind noticed this, and as minds do, tried to turn it into a thought. This is like life. But that thought didn't land very hard. It wasn't needed. Because right then, balance wasn't an idea. It was a sensation. The ground felt solid under the standing foot. Cool, reliable. It hadn't changed. The fear that had been sitting in the chest earlier didn't disappear, but it stopped being the center of attention. There was more interesting information coming in now. Pressure, muscle, breath. The lifted leg trembled. That tremble felt important. It would have been easy to judge it, to see it as weakness, as proof that something wasn't strong enough. But the tremble wasn't failing. It was communicating. It was the body saying, "I'm working." After a few seconds, the foot came down again, both feet on the ground. A small exhale followed longer than expected. The shoulders dropped. Nothing had been solved. Tomorrow was still tomorrow. The unknown was still unknown. But something had shifted. The body had learned even briefly that it could stay upright without knowing what came next. That stability didn't require certainty. It only required attention to what was actually happening now. The other foot lifted. This time, balance came a little faster. Not because anything magical had changed, but because the body remembered. It remembered that wobbling wasn't danger. It was part of staying up. A breeze moved through the lot. The overhead lights hummed softly. Somewhere a door closed. Standing there, it became obvious how often balance gets confused with control. As if staying steady means locking everything down. As if fear could be managed by gripping harder. But here gripping did the opposite. Tightening made the wobble worse. Soft knees worked better. A relaxed jaw worked better. Letting the breath move without directing it worked better. The lifted leg shook again, then steadied. And for a moment, there was a quiet understanding that didn't need words. The feeling of being unsure didn't mean something was wrong. It just meant the body was alive, responding, adjusting, staying present with what was real instead of what might happen. Eventually, the foot came down. Both feet rested on the ground again. The parking lot hadn't changed. The future hadn't explained itself. But standing there, grounded and simple, it felt clear that balance was not something you achieve once and keep forever. It was something you kept meeting moment by moment, especially when things felt unstable. And that was enough for now. Later that night, the body remembered the parking lot. Not as a clear picture, but as a feeling. A subtle memory of weight shifting, of standing without rushing to correct every small movement. It showed up while brushing teeth, while rinsing the mug in the sink, while standing in the dim light of the living room, with nothing particular to do. The mind, meanwhile, kept doing what it always does. It leaned forward. It brought up questions without answers. What if the next step didn't work out? What if something important slipped? What if the balance that felt possible for a moment didn't last? Fear has a way of talking about the future as if it's already real, as if it has evidence, as if it's being helpful. But standing in the quiet room, it was easier to see that fear wasn't actually responding to what was happening. Nothing was wrong in that moment. The floor was still there. The lights were steady. The body was breathing. So without much ceremony, one foot lifted again. This time it wasn't playful. It wasn't accidental. It was deliberate but not tense. The standing foot pressed into the floor. The other leg bent slightly at the knee. The body swayed just a little. And there it was, again. That familiar instability. The first instinct was to tighten, to brace, to lock the ankle and hold still. But the memory from earlier interrupted that reflex. Tightening didn't help. It never had. So instead, there was a pause. Not a long pause. Just long enough to notice the urge to control. The body softened where it could. The jaw unclenched. The shoulders dropped half an inch. The breath was allowed to arrive and leave without being shaped. The wobble didn't disappear, but it became workable. Standing on one leg like that made something obvious. The body wasn't asking for guarantees. It wasn't demanding a promise that it wouldn't fall. It was simply asking for presence. For attention to the signals coming in right now instead of imagined outcomes. Fear, on the other hand, kept pointing somewhere else. Later. Soon. What if there was nothing wrong with fear being there? It wasn't an enemy. It was just early. Too early to be useful. The lifted leg trembled again, stronger this time. Muscles fired in quick, quiet patterns. The body adjusted without thinking. A tiny lean forward. A micro shift in the hip. Balance appeared not as stillness, but as constant movement. It was impossible to miss the metaphor, but it didn't need to be explained. The body already understood. Nothing stays fixed. Not balance, not fear, not stability. Trying to freeze any of it only creates strain. After a while, the foot came down. The body rested. The feeling lingered. Later, still lying in bed, the mind tried again. It replayed conversations that hadn't happened yet. It outlined possible problems. It built detailed images of things going wrong, all with the same tone of urgency. But now there was another reference point. Instead of arguing with the thoughts, attention shifted downward. To the weight of the body on the mattress. To the contact points. To the quiet fact of being supported without effort. Balance didn't require standing on one leg forever. It only required knowing where the ground was. And the ground was here. Fear talked about the future as if it were a place you had already arrived. But the body knew better. The body only ever stood in one moment at a time. One breath, one shift, one adjustment. That night there was no big realization, no dramatic release, just a gradual loosening of the need to solve anything before resting. The next morning would come whether it was prepared for or not. The future would change shape the moment it arrived. It always did. Standing, sitting, lying down. None of these were permanent positions. They were all temporary arrangements, useful for a while, then replaced by the next one. and maybe that was the quiet lesson hidden in the wobble. Stability was not something to secure in advance. It was something that appeared when attention stayed close enough to respond. Eventually, sleep came. Not because fear had vanished, but because it no longer needed to be managed. It was allowed to exist without being followed. And somewhere in the background, the body remembered how to stand. Not perfectly, not forever, but well enough. Enough to trust the next step when it arrived. Miguel's hands smelled like garlic even after he washed them. He stood behind the restaurant in the narrow alley where the air was cooler and the noise of the kitchen faded into a distant hum. A single bulb above the back door buzzed softly, attracting nothing but a few tired moths. The night had that end-of-shift stillness, half relief, half emptiness. He turned the faucet on at the small outdoor sink and let cold water run over his fingers. The metal handle was slick. The water hit his skin hard and clear, and for a moment it felt like it cut through everything. Then the feeling came back. The heat. Not in his hands, in his chest. Miguel was 45, a line cook who'd spent most of his life moving fast in tight spaces, dodging hot pans and sharp words with the same reflex. He didn't talk much during service. There wasn't time. Communication came in quick signals, behind hot yes chef, and if something went wrong, you fixed it without turning it into a story. But tonight, someone had turned it into a story. A new guy on the line, young, cocky, loud, had made a mistake during the rush, then blamed Miguel for it. Not privately, out loud, in front of everyone. The kind of blame that sticks to you for a second, just long enough to make you feel exposed. Miguel didn't yell back. He didn't fight him on the spot. He just corrected the plate, kept moving, kept his face neutral the way he always did. It was only now in the alley that the anger finally caught up. He scrubbed his hands harder than he needed to, as if the cold water could wash off humiliation. The skin along his knuckles reddened. He didn't care. The anger felt like it needed somewhere to go, and his hands were the closest place. He shut the water off and stood there breathing through his nose. The alley smelled like wet cardboard and dish soap. Somewhere nearby, a dumpster lid clanged shut. A car passed on the street, sound bending around the corner and fading. Miguel replayed the moment. The accusation, the smirk, the laughter from someone who didn't know what else to do. He felt his jaw tighten, his throat go dry. He imagined what he could have said. The perfect comeback. The sharp sentence that would have made the kid shrink. The one that would have restored Miguel's dignity in one clean slice. But dignity doesn't work like that. Not in real life. Not in kitchens. Miguel leaned his forearms on the edge of the sink and stared down at the drain. A slow drip fell from the faucet. 1, 2, 3. A quiet, steady rhythm. He thought of a story his grandmother used to tell in Spanish when he was little, one he didn't fully understand at the time. A snake bites a saw, thinking the saw is an enemy. The saw doesn't react. It doesn't feel pain. It just stays what it is, hard, sharp, unmoving. The snake keeps attacking faster and harder until it's bleeding from its own mouth. In the end, the saw hasn't been harmed at all. The snake has only injured itself. Miguel hadn't thought about that story in years. Tonight it landed with uncomfortable precision. Because the new guy in the kitchen wasn't the saw, not exactly. He was human. He could feel. He could be wrong. He could be cruel. But Miguel's anger, his replaying, his tightening, his imagined arguments, was biting at something that wasn't even here anymore. The moment had passed. The rush was over. The kid was probably inside laughing with someone else or scrolling his phone, not thinking about Miguel at all. Miguel was the one bleeding now, not visibly, but in the way his stomach churned, in the way his shoulders stayed high, in the way he couldn't relax even though the shift was finished. He looked down at his hands again. The skin was red raw from scrubbing. He flexed his fingers and felt a sting. He had done that. Nobody else. Miguel let out a breath and leaned back against the brick wall, feeling its cool roughness through his shirt. He closed his eyes for a second and listened to the quiet. Anger makes you think you're holding power, but a lot of the time it's just holding you. Miguel wasn't ready to forgive the kid. That word felt too soft for what had happened. It wasn't nothing. It had mattered. It had stung. What Miguel wanted was something simpler than forgiveness. He wanted to stop hurting himself after the fact. He wanted to stop biting the saw. He opened his eyes and looked at the alley again. Nothing had changed. The light still buzzed. The water still dripped. The night was still the night. But his attention shifted. Instead of replaying the scene, he noticed his own breathing. Short, high in the chest. He let it drop lower just a little, as if giving his body permission to come down from the rush. He turned the faucet on again, gentler this time, and rinsed his hands without scrubbing. The cold water soothed instead of punished. He watched it run over his skin and disappear, taking the sting down a notch. A small mercy. Miguel dried his hands on a paper towel and threw it away. The towel hit the bin with a soft thud. He stood there, still feeling the anger, but no longer feeding it with motion. No more bites. Just stillness. Miguel locked the back door and stepped onto the sidewalk, the sound of the latch echoing once before fading. The night air felt cooler away from the kitchen vents, cleaner somehow. He walked a few blocks before reaching his car, letting the movement work the last of the rush out of his body. The anger came with him. Not sharp now, heavy, like something lodged under the ribs that made breathing feel a little shorter than usual. He drove with the window cracked open, city sounds slipping in and out, streetlights passing in a steady rhythm. At a red light, his hands tightened on the steering wheel without him noticing. His jaw followed. The scene replayed again, uninvited. The kid's voice, the laughter, the look that said, "It's not my fault." Miguel felt the old urge to bite again, to chew the moment until it bled out every possible ending. He noticed it this time. The urge itself. How it rose up hot and immediate, asking for teeth. He loosened his grip. Just a little. The light turned green. He drove on. At home, the apartment was dark and quiet. Miguel dropped his keys on the counter and stood there for a moment, listening to the silence. No orders, no timers, no voices cutting through the air, just the low hum of the refrigerator and the faint tick of the clock on the wall. He poured himself a glass of water and drank it slowly. The coolness settled his stomach. He felt the day sink lower in his body, inch by inch. Miguel sat at the small kitchen table and rested his forearms on the wood. The surface was smooth from years of use. He traced a shallow scratch with his finger, following it until it disappeared under his hand. The anger hadn't vanished. It still made sense. It still had reasons. But it no longer felt urgent. Forgiveness, he realized, didn't have to mean letting the kid off the hook. It didn't have to mean pretending the disrespect hadn't happened. It didn't even have to involve another conversation. It could simply mean choosing not to keep chewing on the blade. Miguel stood up and went to the sink again, this time to wash a single cup. He moved slowly, deliberately. No scrubbing, no punishment, just water and motion. In bed later, he lay on his back and stared at the ceiling. The apartment made its usual nighttime sounds. Somewhere a neighbor's TV murmured. Pipes shifted. The building breathed around him. The memory came back one last time, but without the edge. It felt distant now, like something that had already happened instead of something still happening. Miguel pictured the saw from his grandmother's story. Solid, unmoving, uninterested in the snake's fury. It wasn't proud. It wasn't cold. It simply didn't participate. He let that image settle. Not everything needs a response. Not every insult needs teeth. Some things lose their power when you stop attacking them. His breathing slowed. The tension in his shoulders eased. The anger, no longer sharpened by replay, softened into fatigue, the honest kind that comes at the end of a long day's work. As sleep approached, Miguel felt the quiet relief of no longer fighting something that wasn't fighting back. The saw remained what it was. The snake finally still stopped hurting itself. And in that stillness, the night took over, gentle and unremarkable, letting the body rest without one more bite. Tessa's hands were shaking just a little when she got home. Not the kind of shaking you can see across the room. Just the kind you notice when you try to do something simple like put your keys in the bowl by the door and miss the first time. The keys clinked against the ceramic, too loud for the quiet apartment, and she winced like the sound had accused her of something. She stood there for a second, staring at the wall, letting the day sit on her shoulders. Tessa was 26, worked a front desk job at a small clinic, and most days she was good at keeping her voice calm. She smiled when people were short with her. She stayed polite when someone snapped. She made the schedule work even when it didn't. That was her skill, taking other people's mess and making it move smoothly. But today, something had gotten through. It wasn't a single big thing. It was the way a patient had spoken to her like she was furniture, the way a coworker had tossed her a last-minute task and walked away without a thank you, the way she'd swallowed it all, stacked it inside herself, and kept going. By the time her shift ended, she felt full. Not full in a satisfied way. Full like a cup filled to the rim with hot liquid. One more bump and it would spill. Now she was home and the apartment was quiet enough to hear her own thoughts. That was usually when the anger came. Not during the day, after, when the body finally had room to feel what it had been holding back. Tessa kicked off her shoes and walked straight to the kitchen sink. She didn't turn on music. She didn't check her phone. She didn't sit down. She turned the faucet on, cold. The water rushed out in a clear, steady stream. The sound filled the room immediately, simple, constant, not asking for explanation. Tessa held her hands under it, palms up, letting the cold hit her skin. It was almost shocking. Her fingers stiffened, then slowly relaxed as the cold spread. She watched the water run over her knuckles and down into the drain, taking nothing visible with it, and still somehow making her feel lighter. Anger is heat. It rises fast, burns hot, convinces you that you need to do something with it right now, to respond, to correct, to punish, to prove you're not small. And when you can't do any of those things, the heat turns inward. It stays trapped. It cooks you from the inside out. Tessa leaned forward and let the cold water run over her wrists, the pulse points, the places that always seem to hold stress first. She didn't do it like a technique. She did it like someone reaching for something real. The anger didn't disappear, but it stopped expanding. She turned the water down just a little and listened to the softer stream. The whole moment felt strangely intimate, like the kitchen was witnessing her without judging. In her mind, she replayed the day, the words people had said, the tone, the look on a face when someone decided she didn't matter. Her chest tightened again. Then she let the cold water bring her back. Not away from the memory, just back into her own body. She grabbed a dish towel and dried her hands. The fabric was rough in a familiar way. She hung it back on the oven handle and stood there breathing, feeling the first small drop in temperature inside her. She could still feel the anger, but it wasn't in control. That was new. Tessa poured herself a glass of water and drank it slowly. The coolness moved down her throat and into her chest like it was making space. A memory surfaced, something her grandmother used to say in Vietnamese when she was little. Tessa didn't remember the exact words, but she remembered the meaning. When something is too hot, you don't punch it. You cool it. You don't fight fire with more fire. You don't meet sharpness with sharpness. You bring something softer, steady, cooling something that doesn't escalate. Tessa sat at the small kitchen table and rested her arms on the surface. She didn't open her laptop. She didn't scroll. She let the room be quiet. In the quiet, she noticed something honest. A lot of her anger wasn't just about how people treated her. It was about how often she didn't protect herself. How often she smiled through things that hurt. How often she told herself it wasn't worth speaking up. Her anger wasn't evil. It was tired. It was the part of her that knew she deserved gentleness and hadn't been getting enough of it from others and from herself. That thought softened her more than it should have. Tessa blinked a few times, surprised by the sting behind her eyes. She didn't cry, not fully, just felt that thin edge where tears could happen. The body's way of cooling itself too. She stood up and turned the faucet on again, lower this time, more like a small stream than a rush. She rinsed one plate that was already clean. Not because it needed it, because the movement was steady, because the sound was steady, because it kept her from building a whole fire out of one day. The plate clinked gently in the sink. The water ran. The room stayed calm. Tessa realized she didn't have to forgive anyone tonight. She didn't have to reach for a big, noble feeling. She just had to stop burning. Cool water first, clarity later. Tessa left the kitchen light on low and moved through the apartment slowly, like she didn't want to stir the heat back up. The cold from the water still lingered in her hands, a gentle reminder that her body knew how to cool itself when she let it. She changed into soft clothes and sat on the edge of her bed for a moment, feet flat on the floor, letting the day settle. The anger returned briefly like a reflex, checking to see if it was still needed. She noticed it, then noticed how different it felt now, less sharp, more tired. Earlier, she might have let it spill. A text from a coworker, a comment online, a memory replayed too long. Any of those could have tipped her over. Tonight, she felt the moment before the spill and recognized it. That recognition alone was enough to slow things down. She went back to the sink and filled a bowl with cool water. Not icy, just cool enough to feel clear. She held the bowl in both hands, feeling the temperature through the ceramic. The weight grounded her. She set it on the counter and dipped her fingers in again briefly, then dried them on the towel. Small acts, quiet acts. They didn't fix the world. They didn't rewrite the day. They just kept her from adding more heat. Later, lying in bed, Tessa stared at the ceiling and listened to the soft nighttime sounds, the hum of the building, a distant car, the faint movement of air through the vents. Her breath slowed on its own, like her body was finally convinced it was safe to rest. The people who had been sharp with her earlier drifted through her thoughts, less defined now. Their faces blurred. Their words lost their edge. Not because they'd become kind, but because she'd stopped carrying their heat for them. Forgiveness, she understood, wasn't about saying what happened was okay. It was about choosing not to stay inflamed long after the moment had passed. Cool water doesn't argue with fire. It doesn't fight. It simply does what it does. As her thoughts softened, Tessa felt something new take its place. Not relief exactly, but spaciousness. The kind that lets the body stretch out from the inside. The kind that doesn't demand answers. Tomorrow she might speak up. Tomorrow she might set a boundary. Tomorrow she might still feel angry. But tonight she didn't need to decide any of that. Tonight she had already done the most important thing. She had cooled herself enough to rest. The bowl of water sat forgotten on the counter. The sink dried. The apartment settled into its own quiet rhythm. And Tessa, no longer burning, let the night carry the rest. There are moments when anger arrives quietly, not as an explosion, but as a tightening. The jaw sets. The shoulders lift. The mind begins to gather evidence. It doesn't feel dramatic. It feels justified. And that's what makes it hard to notice. It happened after a meeting that ran a little longer than planned. A comment was made, not loud, not cruel on the surface, just sharp enough to land. sharp enough to replay itself on the drive home. The car was parked in the company lot, engine already off, but the body hadn't caught up yet. The steering wheel was still warm from both hands gripping it too tightly. Outside the building, lights hummed. Somewhere far away, another car door closed. The world had moved on. Inside the car, the moment was still stuck. The comment kept looping. The tone, the timing, the way it had landed in front of others. The mind began filling in the rest. They meant that. They always do this. They don't respect me. Anger likes to pretend it's clear-sighted. It says I see exactly what happened. But often it's working with very little information and a very loud story. A coffee cup sat in the holder between the seats. The lid clicked softly as it was twisted back and forth, back and forth. The motion was automatic. Something the hands did when the mind didn't know where else to go. It felt obvious who was wrong. It felt obvious who had crossed a line. And it felt necessary to hold on to that feeling, as if letting it go would mean admitting something painful, or worse, letting someone get away with it. But there was a small pause. Not a decision, just a pause. In that pause, a strange image surfaced. Not related to work, not related to the meeting. Just an image of someone watching a musician play without being able to hear the music. Watching the movement, the expressions, the timing of the hands, and deciding based on that alone what the music must be. It's easy to judge a performance when you can't hear the sound. The thought wasn't comforting. It was unsettling. Because it suggested something uncomfortable, maybe the picture being judged wasn't complete. Maybe the mind was reacting to movement without sound, action without context, words without the story behind them. The anger didn't disappear. It stayed, warm and tight, but it shifted slightly. From "they're wrong" to "I might not be hearing the whole thing." That shift didn't feel noble. It felt irritating. Part of the mind wanted to snap back into certainty. Certainty feels safer than ambiguity. Certainty lets anger stretch its legs and settle in. But ambiguity has a way of loosening things. The parking lot light flickered once, then steadied. The coffee lid clicked again. A breath went in a little deeper than before. Another went out a little slower, not intentionally, just because the body does that when it senses there might be less danger than it thought. Anger often assumes intent. It assumes meaning. It assumes knowledge. It fills in gaps quickly and confidently. And when it does, it usually puts the heaviest weight on the worst explanation. But intent lives in a place we don't have access to. It lives in histories we don't know, pressures we don't see, worries that don't announce themselves. It doesn't mean the comment was fine. It doesn't mean it didn't hurt. It just means the story built around it might be louder than the facts. There was a moment of imagining the other person's day. Not in detail. Not as an excuse. Just a brief acknowledgement that there was a day. Emails, deadlines, their own internal weather. A song playing in their head that no one else could hear. That thought didn't soften everything, but it interrupted the momentum. Anger needs momentum. It needs agreement. It needs repetition. When it doesn't get those, it starts to lose its grip. The hand stopped twisting the coffee lid. It rested there instead. The chest still felt tight, but not as locked. The mind still had opinions, but they were less sharp, less eager to attack. It became possible, just possible, to see that reacting fully right now would be like judging a piece of music while wearing earplugs. Confident, loud, and probably wrong in important ways. Nothing was resolved in that car. No forgiveness was granted. No insight was crowned as wisdom. There was only a small restraint, a choice not to throw the hot coal immediately. The engine was still off. The night was still early. And for the first time since the meeting ended, the anger wasn't being fed. It was just there, waiting, unsure if it would be picked up again. The anger didn't leave that night. It rarely does just because it's been noticed. Instead, it changed shape. It became quieter, more patient. The kind of anger that waits until later, until the house is dark and the mind has room to wander. At-home shoes were kicked off near the door. The kitchen light stayed off. Only the soft glow from a lamp in the living room filled the space. Everything felt normal, almost calm. And that's usually when the mind decides it's safe to continue. The comment returned, but this time with edits. New wording, better comebacks. A version of the conversation where things were said clearly, firmly, perfectly. Where respect was demanded and received. Anger likes to rehearse. It believes that if it can get the script right, the pain will disappear. Or at least feel justified. A phone sat face down on the coffee table. It would be easy to pick it up, to send a message, to clarify, to correct, to make sure the other person understood exactly how it felt. The urge felt clean, responsible even. This isn't anger, the mind whispered. This is standing up for yourself. But there was that earlier image again, the person watching music without sound, judging tempo without hearing rhythm, deciding meaning from movement alone. What if this response too was being written without hearing the full song? That question didn't stop the urge. It just slowed it. Enough to notice something else underneath the anger. Not rage, not hatred. Something more fragile. Embarrassment. A sense of being exposed. The old ache of wanting to be taken seriously. Anger often arrives as protection. It steps in front of softer feelings and speaks loudly so they don't have to. The phone stayed on the table. Not because of discipline, because the body felt tired of holding a shield all the time. A glass of water was poured at the sink. The sound was steady, ordinary. The kind of sound that doesn't demand attention. The glass was fuller than intended. Water crept toward the edge and spilled slightly onto the counter. It wasn't dramatic. Just enough to notice. The towel was grabbed without irritation. The spill wiped up. No commentary, no blame, no lingering. It was such a small thing. But it landed. Problems don't always need to be thrown away. Some things are cleaned, quietly, without punishment. The mind returned to the moment in the meeting, the tone, the timing. And then for the first time, another possibility was allowed to exist alongside the original story. Not replacing it, just sitting next to it. What if that comment wasn't aimed? What if it wasn't about me? What if it came from stress, not intent? These questions didn't excuse the impact. They didn't erase the sting, but they loosened the grip of certainty. And certainty is what turns anger into a prison. Forgiveness is often misunderstood. It's imagined as something generous, something done for another person, a gift, a moral achievement. But more often, forgiveness begins as a practical decision. A refusal to keep replaying the same scene in the same tone. A choice to stop letting the nervous system stay on high alert for something that already passed. The anger was still there, but it was no longer being sharpened. The mind tried once more to rehearse the conversation. This time it didn't have as much energy. The lines sounded forced, overworked, like a joke told too many times. The body shifted on the couch. A deeper breath came and went. Not because it was instructed to, because there was room for it now. It became clear that holding on to the anger wasn't keeping anyone accountable. It was just keeping the moment alive, over and over, long after it needed to be. And maybe that's what forgiveness actually is. Not saying what you did was fine, not pretending it didn't hurt, but deciding that the moment doesn't get unlimited access to your nights. The thought of responding tomorrow after sleep, after space, felt different than responding now. Less charged, less urgent, more grounded. That difference mattered. The lamp was turned off. The room darkened. The house made its small, settling sounds. Pipes, walls, the quiet proof that time was moving forward, whether the mind cooperated or not. Anger can be like listening to only the loudest instrument in a song and assuming that's all there is. Forgiveness doesn't require loving the music. It only asks that you admit there might be more playing than you can hear right now. Lying there, nothing was resolved. No apologies imagined, no outcomes guaranteed. Just a body that no longer needed to stay clenched around a single note. The anger wasn't gone, but it wasn't in charge. And for tonight, that was enough. Lila sat in her car with the engine off, hands resting on the steering wheel long after the drive was over. The parking lot was quiet, washed in pale yellow light from a single lamp above. She could still smell the hospital on her clothes, cleaning solution latex, something faintly metallic. The smell lingered no matter how many times she told herself the shift was finished. She hadn't turned the radio on. She hadn't checked her phone. She just sat there breathing slowly, letting the silence press in around her. It had been a heavy day, not dramatic, not urgent, just heavy in the way hospice days often were. Quiet conversations, long pauses, a hand held a little longer than usual, a goodbye that didn't need words. Lila was good at this work. She knew how to be present without fixing, how to sit beside someone without filling the space. People often told her she had a calming presence, as if it were something she'd been born with. They didn't see the weight she carried afterward. She reached for the small towel she kept in the car and wiped her hands, even though they were already clean. It was a habit she'd developed over time. Not to remove dirt exactly, but to mark a transition, work to home, holding to releasing. Still, some days it didn't feel like enough. Lila leaned back in the seat and closed her eyes. Images from the day drifted through her mind, not sharply, but insistently. A quiet room, a shallow breath, a family member standing in the doorway, unsure where to put their grief. She felt tired in a way sleep didn't always touch. A thought surfaced, one she didn't like but knew well. Why does so much pain pass through me? Not as a complaint, more as a wondering, as if she were trying to understand the cost of caring. Outside the car, the night air had cooled. Somewhere nearby, a sprinkler clicked on water, hissing softly against grass. The sound grounded her, pulling her attention outward for a moment. Lila opened her eyes and looked at her hands again. They were steady, capable, ordinary hands that had done extraordinary things simply by staying. She thought about something she'd learned early on, back when she first started volunteering. An older nurse had said it casually one afternoon while they stood washing their hands side by side. Nothing grows clean, she'd said. Not the good stuff. At the time, Lila hadn't known what to make of it. It sounded like one of those phrases people repeat without thinking. But over the years, the meaning had settled in. She pictured a lotus the way she'd once seen it in a book, blooming above dark water roots, buried deep in thick mud. The image wasn't pretty if you looked too closely at the bottom. But the flower itself wasn't diminished by where it came from. It was shaped by it. Lila exhaled slowly. The idea didn't erase the day. It didn't turn grief into something beautiful. It simply reframed it just enough to keep her from pushing it away. Maybe the mud wasn't a sign she was doing something wrong. Maybe it was the ground she was growing from. She sat there longer than usual, letting that thought rest without arguing with it. She didn't need to believe it fully. She just needed to let it exist alongside the tiredness. When she finally opened the car door, the cool air met her skin. She stepped out and stretched her shoulders, feeling the tightness release slightly. The night sky above was dark, cloudless. No stars visible from this lot. That was okay. Not every place needed to be beautiful. Lila walked toward her building keys, in hand, footsteps slow. With each step, the day felt a little less sticky. Not gone, just less attached. She knew tomorrow would bring more of the same. More quiet endings. More moments she couldn't fix. More weight. But she also knew something else now. Something she'd learned not from books, but from standing where she stood. What grew in her wasn't despite the mud. It was because of it. Inside her apartment, Lila moved slowly, as if the night itself had asked her not to rush. She set her keys down in the same small bowl by the door, hung her jacket on the hook, and slipped off her shoes. The familiar sounds of home settled around her, the soft click of the lamp turning on the distant hum of a refrigerator. The quiet steadiness of a place that asked nothing from her. She washed her hands again at the sink, letting the water run longer than necessary. Not to clean, but to feel. Warmth over skin. Movement without effort. She dried them carefully and noticed how her shoulders had dropped without her telling them to. Lila walked into the living room and sat on the couch, feet tucked beneath her. The cushion gave way gently, She leaned back and closed her eyes for a moment, letting the weight of the day settle instead of resisting it. The images returned softer now. Faces, voices, silence. They didn't demand anything. They just passed through like clouds moving slowly across a night sky. She realized something she hadn't always understood when she was younger. That caring didn't mean carrying everything forever, that being open didn't require staying soaked. There was a difference between allowing something to touch you and letting it drown you. The lotus came to her mind again. Not as a picture this time, but as a feeling. The sense of something rising steadily without hurry through thick water. It didn't curse the mud. It didn't rush past it. It simply used it. Lila placed one hand on her chest and felt her breathing steady, quiet, alive. Her heart beat on, unconcerned with the stories she told herself about the day. It just kept going, faithful and patient. She thought about how often people praised strength without understanding what it was made of. How they admired calm without seeing the effort beneath it. How they loved the flower but forgot the soil. But the soil remembered. The mud held everything. The mess, the decay, the nutrients. Without it, there was nothing to rise from. Lila didn't feel lighter exactly. The weight was still there. But it had shifted, settling lower, no longer pressing against her chest. It felt like something she could rest on instead of something she had to fight. She stretched her legs out along the couch and adjusted the blanket over her lap. The fabric was soft, worn just enough to feel familiar. She let her head rest against the cushion and noticed how easily her body fit into the space. Tonight didn't need to be resolved. Nothing needed to be transformed. The work she did mattered not because it was clean or uplifting, but because it was real, because it met life where it actually was not where it wished it could be. Lila's breathing slowed further. Each inhale felt less deliberate, each exhale a little longer. The room grew quieter, or maybe she simply noticed it less. She thought about tomorrow, not with dread, not with planning, but with acceptance. Another day would come, more mud, more moments of quiet courage, more small acts that no one would see, and that was fine. The lotus didn't bloom all at once. It didn't hurry. It didn't apologize for where it grew. Lila let that image soften and fade, leaving only the sense of steady rising of something alive and intact beneath everything. Her eyes stayed closed. The room held her gently. The night did not ask her to be anything other than what she already was. Rooted, breathing, still growing. And for now, that was enough. The locker room smelled like metal and soap. Noah sat on the bench with his boots unlaced, elbows resting on his knees, helmet placed carefully on the floor in front of him. The room was mostly empty now. A few lockers stood open, their doors swinging slightly before settling back into stillness. Somewhere down the hall, a shower ran water hitting tile in a steady rhythm. Noah rubbed a towel across the back of his neck and let out a slow breath. It hadn't been a bad call. No one was hurt. No fire had spread. Everything had gone the way it was supposed to. And yet his body felt worn in that familiar way like something inside him had been scraped a little thinner. He picked up his helmet and turned it in his hands. The surface was scuffed, dulled from years of use. A few scratches caught the light. None of them new, none of them dramatic, just the quiet evidence of repetition. People often talked about his job like it was all adrenaline and heroics, but most days it wasn't like that. Most days were about patience, about waiting, about being ready for something that might not happen. And when it did happen, about staying steady under pressure. That steadiness came at a cost. Noah slid the helmet back into his locker and closed the door. The metal clanged softly final. He leaned back against the bench and stared at the floor, letting his breathing slow. Lately, he'd been feeling the weight of it more than usual. Not fear, not doubt about his ability, something quieter. The sense that each challenge left a mark even when things went well. That each test, each difficult moment was sanding something down inside him. He wondered sometimes if all this friction was slowly wearing him away. An older firefighter had once said something to him during a long night shift years ago. They'd been sitting on the back step of the station drinking burnt coffee, watching the sky lighten just enough to signal morning. "You know what they do with Jade?" the man had said out of nowhere. "They don't cut it clean. They grind it. Over and over. Takes forever." Noah hadn't known what to say at the time. He'd nodded, half listening, half exhausted. Now the memory surfaced again, unexpectedly clear. Jade didn't start out smooth. It wasn't impressive at first glance. It was dense, rough, hard to shape. And the only way it became something people valued was through repeated polishing, through friction. Not all at once, not dramatically, just steadily over time. Noah flexed his hands, noticing the faint soreness in his fingers. These hands had learned how to hold steady when things shook, how to grip, release, adjust. They bore small scars he rarely thought about anymore. He'd always assumed that being tested meant something was wrong. That struggle was a sign of weakness. That if things were truly aligned, they would feel easier. But the jade didn't become dull because it was polished. It became clear. Noah stood and stretched his arms overhead, feeling the tightness along his shoulders release a little. The room seemed quieter now, the earlier energy fully drained away. He thought about the moments that had shaped him the most. They weren't the ones where everything went perfectly. They were the moments that had demanded something from him. Patience, restraint, courage, humility. Moments that had forced him to slow down and stay present. Each one had felt uncomfortable at the time. Each one had left him changed. He picked up his jacket and slipped it on the familiar weight settling around him. It felt grounding, like a reminder of who he was when things got hard. The locker room lights flickered briefly, then steadied. Noah turned toward the door, pausing for a second before leaving. Maybe he wasn't being worn down. Maybe he was being refined. The thought didn't erase the fatigue. It didn't make the work lighter, but it gave the weight a different shape, one he could carry without resentment. Noah reached for the door handle and stepped out into the quiet hallway. The night beyond waited calmly, indifferent to what he'd just been through. And for the first time that evening, he felt less like something was being taken from him, and more like something was being revealed. The hallway outside the locker room felt cooler, quieter. Noah's footsteps echoed softly as he walked toward the exit, the sound fading almost as soon as it appeared. The building had settled for the night. Whatever urgency had filled it earlier was gone now, replaced by a steady calm that didn't need explanation. He pushed the door open and stepped outside. The air was crisp, carrying the faint smell of asphalt and damp grass. A few stars were visible above the station, dim but present. Noah paused, hands in his jacket pockets, and let the night meet him where he was. His body still felt tired. That hadn't changed, but the tiredness no longer felt like something he needed to fight. It felt earned, honest, like a signal that he had stayed present when it mattered. He thought again about the Jade, about how polishing wasn't about force. It was about consistency. Pressure applied slowly, carefully, with attention. Too much and the stone cracked. Too little and nothing changed. The process demanded patience more than strength. That felt familiar. Noah had learned over the years how to stay with difficult moments without rushing past them. How to respond instead of react. How to trust his training when instinct wanted to take over. None of that showed up as brilliance from the outside. It showed up as quiet reliability. And that reliability had been shaped, not gifted. He walked toward his car and unlocked it, the sound of the door opening small and final in the quiet lot. Before getting in, he leaned against the side of the vehicle, feeling the cool metal through his jacket. He remembered times when he'd wished things were easier, when he'd wondered why certain challenges kept returning slightly different, but familiar enough to recognize. He'd thought he was failing to move past something. Now the pattern looked different. The repetition wasn't punishment. It was practice. Each time he stayed steady, something inside him smoothed out just a little more. Each time he chose patience over force, clarity over impulse. He became more himself, not less. Noah sat in the driver's seat and closed the door. The interior light clicked on briefly, then went dark. He rested his hands on the steering wheel and took a slow breath in, then out. The mind liked to tell stories about struggle, that it meant damage, that it meant loss. But the body often knew better. The body understood adaptation. It understood how friction could strengthen instead of weaken. He started the car and let it idle, not in a hurry to leave. The engine's low vibration traveled up through the seat, grounding him. Noah didn't feel proud. He didn't feel accomplished. What he felt was something quieter and more stable, a sense of trust. Trust that what he was going through was shaping him in ways he couldn't fully see yet. The jade didn't shine while it was being polished. It didn't announce its progress. It simply endured the process, slowly becoming clear. Noah pulled out of the lot and onto the road. The station disappeared behind him, lights dimming in the rearview mirror. The route home was familiar. He didn't need directions. As he drove, the tension in his shoulders eased. His thoughts loosened their grip. The day began to recede, leaving behind only what was necessary. He wasn't broken. He wasn't behind. He was becoming. The road stretched ahead, dark and open. Noah followed it, calmly illuminated, just enough to keep moving. Whatever came next would bring its own friction. He knew that, but now it felt less like something to fear and more like part of the shaping. The jade would continue to be polished, and in its own time, it would shine. The phone was still in her hand when Priya realized she hadn't heard her own thoughts in hours. The room was dim lit only by a small lamp on the nightstand. Outside traffic passed in slow waves, the sound softened by distance and glass. Priya lay on her bed with one leg bent, the other stretched out, scrolling without really seeing anything. Opinions, updates, advice, noise. Her thumb moved automatically, trained by habit more than interest. Every post seemed to carry a suggestion: what to care about, what to fix, what to become. None of it was meant specifically for her, but all of it felt oddly personal. She sighed and locked the screen, placing the phone face down beside her. The sudden quiet felt unfamiliar, like stepping into a room after music stops. Priya stared at the ceiling. She'd always been good at listening. At work, she absorbed feedback easily, adjusted quickly, stayed aware of expectations. Among friends, she picked up on moods, unspoken tensions, shifts in tone. She had learned early that paying attention kept things smooth. But somewhere along the way, listening had turned outward almost entirely. Lately, she'd felt unsure in small ways, not lost, just disconnected. Decisions that used to feel simple now came with hesitation. She found herself asking for reassurance more often, checking reactions before trusting her own instincts. It wasn't that she didn't have an inner voice. It was that it had become very quiet. Priya rolled onto her side and pulled the blanket up around her shoulders. The fabric brushed softly against her skin. She adjusted the pillow until it felt just right, then stilled. In the absence of the phone's glow, the room felt larger, slower. Her breathing, which she hadn't noticed before, became more obvious, steady, a little shallow, then deeper. She remembered something her mother used to say when Priya was younger, usually when she was overwhelmed or unsure. If you can't hear yourself, she'd say, it doesn't mean you're lost. It just means the room is loud. At the time, Priya hadn't thought much of it. Now, lying here with the world temporarily muted, the words surfaced gently. She closed her eyes. At first, there was nothing, just static, leftover thoughts from the day. Half-finished conversations, to-do lists that hadn't gotten the message that the day was over. She didn't push them away. She let them pass. Slowly, the noise thinned. Priya noticed the smallest sensations, the weight of the blanket, the warmth of the mattress, the way her jaw loosened when she wasn't paying attention to it. These weren't messages or insights, just signals that she was here. And then beneath all that, something softer. Not words, not instructions, a sense. It was easy to miss, like a whisper that didn't insist on being heard. It didn't argue. It didn't explain itself. It simply felt true, familiar, almost shy. Priya didn't try to name it. She stayed still, afraid that effort might make it disappear. She realized how different this felt from the noise she usually responded to. The loud opinions came with urgency, with pressure, with certainty about what should be done next. This quiet voice didn't rush. It didn't compete. It waited. Priya breathed in slowly, then out. The quiet didn't go away. It stayed right where it was, not asking to be followed, just asking to be noticed. She thought about how often she'd mistaken volume for wisdom, how often she'd trusted what spoke the loudest, the fastest, the most confidently, and how that had slowly taught her to doubt what arrived gently. The quiet voice wasn't fragile. It was patient. It had been there the whole time. Priya turned slightly onto her back, one hand resting on her stomach. Her breathing deepened again naturally, as if her body recognized the moment before her mind did. She didn't need to decide anything tonight. She didn't need to act on what she felt. She just needed to remember that it existed. The lamp cast a soft circle of light on the wall. The rest of the room stayed in shadow. The outside world continued, but it felt farther away now. Priya let herself stay in that space where nothing demanded her attention, where no one else's voice crowded the room. The quiet voice didn't say much, but it was enough to know it was there. Priya stayed where she was, letting the stillness settle around her. The room felt different now. Not emptier, just calmer. Like a lake after the wind passes when the surface smooths out on its own. The sounds from outside hadn't disappeared completely, but they no longer pulled at her attention. They moved in the background, unimportant. Her breathing slowed without effort. Each inhale felt softer, each exhale a little longer, as if her body was finally being allowed to finish a sentence it had been holding. The quiet voice didn't grow louder. It didn't need to. It stayed exactly the same, gentle, steady, unconcerned with whether she noticed it again tomorrow. It wasn't there to persuade her or push her toward a decision. It wasn't there to compete with anything else. It simply existed. Priya realized how much trust that required. To speak without urgency, to offer guidance without force, to wait without fear of being ignored. She thought about how often she'd overridden that voice in the past, not because it was wrong, but because it was subtle, because it didn't come wrapped in certainty or approval, because it didn't sound like anyone else. But lying here now, she could feel the difference between what calmed her and what agitated her, between what felt aligned and what felt imposed. The quiet voice didn't make her anxious. It didn't make her feel behind. It made her feel settled. Priya shifted slightly, pulling the blanket higher. The fabric brushed her chin, warm and familiar. Her thoughts wandered, but they no longer demanded answers. They drifted like loose threads, not problems to solve. She remembered moments when she'd followed that inner sense without knowing why, choosing a path that didn't make sense to others, saying no when yes would have been easier, leaving something that looked good on the outside but felt wrong on the inside. Those moments hadn't always been comfortable, but they had been honest. The quiet voice wasn't always about comfort. It was about truth. And truth, she realized, didn't need to shout to be real. Her hand rested lightly on her stomach, fingers relaxed. She felt the subtle movement of breath beneath her palm. This body knew things too. It tightened when something was off. It softened when something was right. It had been speaking all along. Priya smiled faintly, not at a thought, but at the realization that she wasn't broken for feeling uncertain. She hadn't lost her way. She had simply been listening in the wrong direction for a while. The noise of the day faded further. Tomorrow didn't press in. The past loosened its grip. There was only this moment, quiet, unremarkable, complete. She didn't promise herself she'd always listen better from now on. She didn't turn the insight into a rule or a goal. She knew the noise would return. It always did. But now she also knew where to find herself when it did. The quiet voice didn't leave. It stayed beneath everything like a steady current under the surface. Always there. Always accessible. Never demanding. Priya's eyes remained closed as sleep began to approach, not abruptly, but gradually. Her thoughts thinned, stretched, then softened into something less defined. The last clear sensation she noticed was a feeling of trust, not in outcomes, not in certainty, but in her own inner rhythm. The world could keep talking. She knew how to listen inward now, and that was enough to rest. There was an extra chair pulled up to the kitchen island, and no one was sitting in it. It hadn't been there earlier in the day. Earlier, the space was tight, crowded with bags, mail, a half-empty water bottle, a laptop pushed to one side. Everything had a place, and that place was usually right where the hands could reach it. Nothing was meant to rest. Everything was meant to be ready. Now, it was late. The overhead light was off, leaving only the small yellow lamp above the sink. The dishwasher hummed in its steady, forgettable way, like a sound the house made when it was allowed to take care of itself. Outside, a car passed once, then the street went quiet again. The chair was plain, wooden, nothing special. It had been pulled over almost without thinking, just slid across the floor until it faced the island. The person standing there didn't sit down right away. They leaned against the counter instead, arms crossed, shoulders lifted a little higher than necessary. All day, there had been things to hold. A meeting that needed preparation, a message that couldn't be ignored, a problem that wasn't technically theirs, but somehow still ended up in their hands. Even dinner had been eaten quickly, standing up, fork resting on the edge of the sink between bites. There was always a sense that if they stopped moving, something might fall apart. The body remembered that feeling now, even though the day was technically over. The shoulders stayed tight. The jaw didn't quite unclench. The mind kept scanning like it was still on duty, waiting for the next thing that might need attention. The empty chair didn't ask for anything. It just stayed where it was. For a moment, the person noticed an odd irritation rise up. The chair felt unnecessary, in the way, like a pause that hadn't been earned yet. There was still tomorrow to think about, still loose ends, still that quiet pressure to be useful, to prove something even to an empty room. They reached for a mug and filled it with water, then set it down on the island without drinking. The dishwasher hummed. A soft click came from somewhere inside it, a small mechanical decision being made without any help. There was a memory, faint but persistent, of being younger and being told to wait, to stand back, to make room. Someone else needed the seat more. Someone else mattered more in that moment. It wasn't said cruelly. It didn't have to be. It was just the way things were arranged. Over time, standing became normal, hovering, being ready, being available. The chair scraped softly as it was pulled back a few inches. The sound was louder than expected in the quiet kitchen. The person paused, hands still on the top rail, as if surprised by their own movement. They sat down slowly. At first it felt wrong, too exposed, like sitting meant admitting something they weren't sure they were allowed to admit yet. The back of the chair pressed gently between the shoulder blades. The feet found the floor. The body registered contact, weight support. Nothing dramatic happened. The room didn't change. The to-do list didn't disappear. Tomorrow didn't cancel itself. But something inside the chest loosened just enough to be noticeable. It's strange how unfamiliar rest can feel when you haven't practiced it in a while. Not the kind of rest that comes from collapsing at the end of the day, but the kind that comes from choosing to stop before you're forced to. The kind that says, just for now, this is enough. The person noticed how the island looked from this angle, how the edge was worn smooth in one spot, how a small crumb had been missed during cleaning. Ordinary details suddenly visible when the body wasn't leaning forward anymore. They rested their hands on their thighs. The fingers twitched once, like they were checking whether they were allowed to be empty. The mind tried out of habit to fill the space. You should answer that email. You forgot to follow up. You could be doing more right now. The thoughts arrived the way they always did, lined up and confident, like they belonged there. But tonight they didn't land quite as hard. It was as if the chair absorbed some of the impact. As if having a place to sit gave the body permission not to obey every instruction immediately. There is a quiet kind of exhaustion that doesn't come from doing too much, but from never letting yourself arrive anywhere. From always being slightly ahead of the moment you're in, reaching for the next thing before this one is even settled. The person noticed their breathing, not in a deliberate way, just noticed that it had slowed. The inhale wasn't rushed. The exhale went a little longer than expected, like the body was surprised it had the time. The empty chair across from them stayed empty. It didn't accuse, it didn't compare. It didn't ask them to earn the right to be there. It simply marked a space where effort wasn't required. For the first time that evening, the person let their shoulders drop fully. Not all at once, just a fraction, enough to feel the difference. Enough to realize how high they'd been holding them all day without noticing. They stayed there longer than they meant to. Not because they were trying to heal anything. Not because they were making a point. Just because for once, nothing was pulling them away. And somewhere in that quiet kitchen with the dishwasher humming and the extra chair holding its place, a small truth settled in. Without words, a maybe rest isn't something you get after everything is done. Maybe it's something you're allowed to take. even when the world keeps going. They didn't stay seated the whole time. After a while, they stood up again, almost out of habit. Rinsed the mug in the sink, wiped a small spill on the counter. The body still knew its routines, still wanted to be useful, still wanted to justify its presence by doing something that looked productive. But when they were done, they didn't rush away. They pulled the chair back again. This time the movement felt less strange, less like stealing time, more like returning to a place that had been there all along. Sitting down didn't feel dramatic anymore. It felt normal, which surprised them. The dishwasher clicked and shifted into a new cycle. A deeper, slower hum filled the kitchen, like the house had decided to settle for the night. The lamp over the sink cast a soft shadow on the wall, uneven and imperfect. Nothing in the room looked curated or impressive. It just looked lived in. From this stillness, another thought surfaced. Not sharp, not demanding, just quiet and persistent. What if I don't have to earn my place here? The idea felt unfamiliar, almost irresponsible. Somewhere along the way, rest had become something that had to be justified. You rest after you finish. You sit once you've proven your value. You stop only when there's nothing left that could possibly need you. But there was always something left. The person thought about how often they'd made space for others without hesitation. Pulled out chairs, adjusted schedules, listened longer than they had energy for, said yes even when their body was already tired. It wasn't resentment they felt now, just a soft recognition of a pattern that had been running quietly for years. They had learned to be the one who stands by, stands in, stands ready. And over time, standing became part of how they measured their worth. If they were needed, they mattered. If they were useful, they belonged. Sitting down felt like disappearing. The empty chair across from them broke that spell a little. It was still there, still unoccupied, still unnecessary in the most ordinary way. And yet it held something important, the idea that space doesn't have to be taken from someone else to exist, that making room for yourself doesn't mean pushing anyone out. The person rested their elbows lightly on the island. The cool surface grounded them. They noticed how the day had finally reached their hands and feet. How tiredness, when allowed to arrive, felt different from exhaustion. Softer, more honest. There's a difference between being worn down and being allowed to stop. They had mistaken one for the other for a long time. The mind tried again to fill the quiet. You could be better than this. You should be further along. Other people don't need this much rest. The thoughts came, but now they were quieter, less convincing, like echoes in a room that had already emptied. The person didn't argue with them, didn't correct them, didn't try to replace them with something more positive. They just let the thoughts pass through the way sound passes through a space, without leaving marks on the walls. They stayed seated. The chair held their weight without comment. In that simple support, something shifted. Not in a way that demanded attention, just enough to change the tone of the evening. The pressure to be impressive softened. The need to justify their existence loosened its grip. They didn't suddenly feel confident or healed or whole in some dramatic sense. They just felt present. And present, it turned out, was enough for the night. The value they had been chasing all day wasn't missing. It hadn't been delayed or denied. It had just been quiet, waiting for them to stop running long enough to notice it. Value didn't come from what they completed, or how much they carried, or how little space they took up. It was already there in the body, sitting in the chair, in the breath moving without effort, in the simple fact of being here even when nothing was being produced. They looked once more at the empty chair across from them and understood it differently now. It wasn't empty because no one deserved it. It was empty because there was finally room. Room to sit without proving anything. Room to rest without explanation. Room to exist without performing. Eventually, they would stand again, turn off the lamp, walk down the hallway. Tomorrow would come as it always did, with its lists and demands and small urgencies. But something would go with them. The memory of that chair, the feel of being supported without conditions, the quiet knowing that their worth hadn't changed based on how much they did. And even when the chair was pushed back under the table, even when the kitchen returned to its usual arrangement, that space would still exist. Not in the room, but inside them. A place they could return to, a place that didn't need to be earned. Some nights, Grace feels like her room has grown smaller than usual. Not because there's more furniture, but because her mind has brought too many things in at once. Each thought feels like another chair being added, another box stacked until there's barely any space left to stand still and breathe. Grace is 62, a retired librarian. Her bedroom is quiet and orderly, everything in its proper place. But that night, standing in the middle of the room, she feels as if she's squeezed in among thoughts that haven't been set down yet. A phone call she hasn't returned, an old memory that showed up without warning. A vague worry about tomorrow, even though there are no real plans. She isn't panicking. She just feels crowded. She turns on the small lamp by the bed. The warm light spills onto the plain wall, making the space feel closer. Grace sits down in the chair and pulls open the top drawer of the nightstand. It doesn't stick, just makes a soft wooden sound, almost like a greeting. Inside are familiar things, a few old letters, her reading glasses, a small bottle of medicine, a worn hair tie. She isn't trying to clean in the usual sense. Her hands just want to touch something solid, something real. Grace takes each item out and places it on the tabletop slowly. The sound of objects touching wood is very gentle. The room doesn't change. But something inside her begins to shift. There's a letter folded into quarters. She opens it, reads a few familiar lines, then folds it back the same way. No digging, no analyzing, just letting it pass through. She sets the letter aside, not to throw it away, just to stop stacking it on top of everything else. A small space appears in the drawer, very small, but noticeable. Grace realizes the room isn't crowded because of too much stuff. It's crowded because everything is pressed too close together. There's no space between things. and her mind is the same way. The thoughts aren't too heavy, they just don't have room to breathe. She places the glasses back in the drawer, but not snug against the edge like before. She leaves a small gap beside them. Then the medicine bottle. Then the hair tie. Each item is set down with just enough space around it, not touching the others. The drawer looks lighter. Not because there's less in it, but because there's space between things. Grace pauses and looks at the open drawer. She doesn't see order in a perfect sense. She sees space. And in that moment, a very gentle realization lands. Quiet isn't the absence of thoughts. It's the space between them. She closes the drawer. The soft sound of wood again. The room is the same. But inside her, something has opened up. Not a big opening, just enough to take a deeper breath. Grace stands and walks a few slow steps around the room. No rush. She looks at the bed, the chair, the picture on the wall. Everything is familiar. Nothing is asking anything of her. And then she sees it clearly. The room was never too small. She had just been standing too close to her thoughts. She sits on the edge of the bed. The mattress sinks slightly. Grace rests her hands on her thighs and exhales. She doesn't try to make it longer. She just lets the breath finish its path. In the space between breaths, there's no question waiting for an answer. Just a thin, quiet sense of calm, real, even if it's light. If you're listening and you feel like the room inside your head is too crowded, too many thoughts packed too tightly tonight, you don't need to clear everything out. You only need to make a small gap between one thought and the next, between what's already happened and what hasn't arrived yet. Grace turns off the lamp. The room settles into softer light. The drawer is closed. Nothing has been thrown away. There's just more space for everything to sit, without pressing against each other, and maybe that alone is enough for the night to begin to feel wider. Grace lies down slowly, as if she doesn't want to disturb the space she's just made wider. The mattress supports her back, familiar and gentle. She doesn't adjust the pillow again and again. She doesn't arrange herself into the right position. She lets her body find its own place, like the objects in the drawer earlier. Not too close, not too far apart. The light in the room is now just a faint glow slipping through the curtains from the street outside. Not bright enough to see clearly, but enough to keep the space from closing in. Grace realizes she likes this kind of light. It doesn't demand that everything be visible. It allows things to be seen just enough. She places one hand on her chest, the other on her belly. Not to control her breathing, just to feel the subtle movement as she inhales and exhales. Between the breaths, there's a brief pause. Grace rarely noticed that space before. It was too small to matter. But tonight it feels like a small side room opening up, no furniture, no tasks, just space. A thought drifts in. Not clear. Just a faint fragment of memory. Grace doesn't push it away. She doesn't hold on to it either. She lets it be there, then allows another thought to appear beside it without letting them touch. Between the two thoughts, there's a gap like the space between items in the drawer. And in that gap, there's no pressure. She realizes something: she doesn't need to be empty to feel at ease. She just needs not to be crowded. The mind can hold thoughts the way a room holds objects. The problem isn't how many there are, it's how closely they're packed. Grace gently turns onto her side. The blanket rustles softly. The space doesn't resist. It receives the movement the same way it receives another breath. She feels her neck and shoulders soften, not because anything has been resolved, but because she's no longer standing too close to what hasn't been resolved. If you're listening and your head feels crowded, thought following thought, with no place to rest tonight, you don't need to clear everything out. You only need to step back a little, create some distance. Let each thought have its own place without stacking on top of the next. Grace exhales longer. Her shoulders sink into the mattress. Inside her, there's a quiet sense of spaciousness. Not joy, not relief. Just enough room to be still. She thinks of the library where she once worked. The shelves were never packed too tightly. There was always space to slide a book out without bumping into the next shelf. The reading rooms always had aisles. The space was designed so people wouldn't feel trapped. And she realizes the mind needs to be treated the same way. The light fades as Grace's eyes close, not because she's trying to sleep, just because her eyes are heavy. In the darkness, the space doesn't disappear. It's still there like a dark room. You know you're standing in, even when you can't see the walls. If you fall asleep at some point while listening to this story, that's completely fine. You're not missing anything. The space doesn't close when your eyes do. It's still there waiting whenever you need it. And if you're still awake, that's okay too. Just stay still a little longer. Let each thought settle with enough space between it and the next, and allow the night to open a bit more. You don't need to empty the room. You only need room to breathe. Listen for a little while and let the space hold you. The stories are done. The lessons are learned. There is nothing left to do. If you found peace in this sanctuary tonight, you can return here whenever you wish. We will keep the fire lit for you. If you wish to support this channel, you may leave a gentle like or subscribe, so we can find each other again in the vast ocean of the internet. But now, as we move into the final space of rest, let's plant seeds of peace deep into your subconscious. Let go, drift, and let these truths become your own. I am rooted to this moment like an ancient mountain. I am rooted to this moment like an ancient mountain. I am rooted to this moment like an ancient mountain. My body feels heavy and solid, like warm stone. My body feels heavy and solid, like warm stone. My body feels heavy and solid like warm stone. The winds of thought blow around me, but I remain unmoved. The winds of thought blow around me, but I remain unmoved. The winds of thought blow around me, but I remain unmoved. I possess the silent strength of the earth. I possess the silent strength of the earth. I possess the silent strength of the earth. My stillness is ancient and deep. Stillness is ancient and deep. My stillness is ancient and deep. Stable and completely safe. Grounded, stable, and completely safe. I am grounded, stable, and completely safe. Like a mountain in winter, I am wrapping myself in a blanket of silence. Like a mountain in winter, I am wrapping myself in a blanket of silence. Like a mountain in winter, I am wrapping myself in a blanket of silence. I rest in the foundation of my own being. Rest in the foundation of my own being. Rest in the foundation of my own being. Breathing is slow and steady, like the seasons. My breathing is slow and steady like the seasons. My breathing is slow and steady like the seasons. Timeless as the rocks. As timeless as the rocks. The earth supports me. I can let go of holding myself up. The earth supports me. I can let go of holding myself up. The earth supports me. I can let go of holding myself up. Sanctuary of stillness. Sanctuary of stillness. Sanctuary of stillness. External noise cannot shake my inner ground. External noise cannot shake my inner ground. External noise cannot shake my inner ground. Relaxation sinking into the earth. Relaxation sinking into the earth. Relaxation sinking into the earth.